I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Friday, guys. Yes, I'm live earlier today, but welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sundays. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And we do have a special guest today. Jill, whenever you're ready, just give me a thumbs up and we'll be good to go. All right. Welcome back, Jill.
Hey, good to see you, Sabby. I see you're dressed for the weather. Me too.
I know it's finally hot enough, because usually July 4th is one of the really hot days that we get here. And now it's for this year, for whatever reason, it wasn't as warm, but it's now finally hot enough.
Oh, yeah, hot enough. Totally over the top hot, at least in my house.
All right, guys, my special guest today is Dr. Jill Stein. She was a former Green Party presidential candidate, and she is now a part of Dr. Cornel West's presidential campaign. Jill, so as you can imagine, I think a lot of us are really curious to how these events unfolded in reference to Dr. West's campaign. He came onto the show the week that he announced that he was running for president, and originally he was running with the People's Party. I did voice to him during that interview some of my concerns with that organization and particularly the leadership. But then later on, he announced that he would be running as a Green. So I'm curious, can you explain to everyone, how did those events unfold? And did you reach out to Dr. West or did they reach out to you?
We reached out to Dr. West, and what happened was, for me, it was like seeing his interview on Democracy Now!, which I think was on a Wednesday. I think he announced on a Monday. He did Democracy Now! On a Wednesday, and it just really tied my stomach in a knot watching that, because it was clear that it wasn't working, and he was really being kind of sidelined. It was kind of coming out of left field for him. He didn't know kind of what he was getting into. He had been involved, I think, more at the policy level or at the advisory level, but not actually involved in the political fray. And, more power to him. There aren't a lot of people who are leading a secure, life as an activist and an academic who dare to stick their necks out in the world of politics. And I think it's a real tribute to him that he was willing to go, into the great unknown. Same thing happened to me, 20 years ago in the basically the year 2000 for the 2002 election. I had no idea what I was getting into. And you just don't until you're out there doing it. So he was kind of getting shell-shocked, I think, by what it was like, and that what he really needed a party that knew how to get him on the ballot, and that didn't come with a whole set of controversies that he was kind of encountering for the first time. And I saw that on a Wednesday, and I thought, oh my God, this is not okay. And he's just not going to survive this. And I, at that point, began calling around to people who've been active in the Green Party and who've been through this rodeo before to get a sense, are you feeling what I'm feeling? You know, are you feeling like this needs to be happening inside the Green Party? Because I didn't want to make waves if it was just me thinking this. So I called maybe 20 different people, and Ajamu Baraka and I had been in conversation about the presidential race and the upcoming elections and all that. And we're having a very active dialogue. So, you know, he was one of the people that I called first. And I have to say, everybody that I talked to felt exactly the same way, that we've had a long-term relationship with Cornell. I think he was actively courted for a while by the People's Party. And, you know, they put together, what should we say, notable conferences and rallies and stuff like that. And if you haven't been through the political rodeo before, you don't know that actually running an election and getting on the ballot, especially as a third party or an independent, is not about conferences and rallies and stuff like that. You can't learn on the fly how to do ballot access. And Greens have been struggling with this since 1996, every 4 years. And to their credit, you know, we keep fighting and we live to fight another day. And just as an aside, people are always saying, oh, the Greens, they're so weak. Yeah, but compared to what? You know, it's like every other independent, non-corporate political party that really challenges power generally gets wiped off the map ever since like the 1920s or so, when political repression really kicked up. Independent political parties don't really last more than about a decade. That's what you would expect. So the Greens keep fighting. You know, we live to fight another day. All political parties are very flawed animals, in my experience. They all are. And independent, non-corporate grassroots parties have their own unique set of challenges. But among them, you know, look at Peace and Freedom Party or the various socialist parties. They may have a city council where they're active, or in some instances a state like Peace and Freedom Party. You can look at the Citizens Party, which was kind of like a predecessor of the Greens in, I think, the 1980s. And they had a kind of a widely known ecologist at the time who sort of put this stuff on the map. They lasted really 2 election cycles. That's all, because the minute you become a threat, you know, you're basically blocked from media. You are vilified and demonized, and it becomes very hard to run an organization when you can't raise money, when you can't get covered in the press, you know, the usual stuff. So at any rate, we reached out to Dr. West. Actually, we reached out to Chris Hedges, and I called him on Friday. And when he was fiddling with his phone, you know, in that famous video, he and I were texting to see if we could get something set up for the next day. So it's like we saw the Democracy Now! On Wednesday, called around on Thursday, contacted Chris on Friday, and we all met on Saturday. And the decision kind of made itself. It really did not take a lot of persuasion. It was like really clear what we were talking about. And that was with Ajamu and myself and Chris. And then Dr. West and a couple of his close advisors. And we all agreed that this is just the way to go. He needed to be running within the structure of the Green Party, competing basically for the Green Party's nomination. And that concurrently, the Greens would be fighting for ballot access, which we're doing anyhow, but now doing it with a whole lot more, you know, enthusiasm. It's just been an incredible wave of joy that's pouring into the campaign, and it's unlike any other campaign that I've been a part of, because there's, you know, Dr. West is not new. He's a known quantity, and he's not figuring out his agenda. You know, he's been talking about it for decades. So people really know him, and it's especially, you know, working people and the poor who are being thrown under the bus by the current political options. So there's just so much excitement and delight that people who've been locked out, marginalized communities, suddenly now have a voice that they can trust. And it's been just really wonderful watching people pour into the campaign.
Agreed. Now I know, if I remember correctly, I believe you were on the ballot when you ran in over 40 states. If I remember correctly, you had a quite a good amount of ballot access.
We had 47. There were 3 states in which we qualified as a write-in candidate. So with those 3, we were on 47. And the 3 that we weren't on, are low population states. I don't remember which ones they were, but we were on the ballot for at least 95% of Americans had a choice.
Yep, that's what I thought. So for some people, because I do call in once a week too, so some people have asked that question. They're like, well, how is he going to get, more ballot access? And I always remind them, well, Jill was on the ballot in over 40 states. Like, it's not talked about a lot, but I think people need to continue to reiterate that point. But the other thing that I have noticed is that there are these, quote unquote, progressive outlets like Jacobin and The Nation. I don't know if we call The Nation progressive anymore. They have been pretty consistent in reference to creating these articles within the past couple of weeks saying that Dr. West should run as a Democrat. Now, for me, that is a no-go. They even gone as far as to lie and to say so that he can get on the debate stage. But what debate stage when we know that the Democratic Party has already said there's not going to be any primary debates? Do you think that they are afraid that Dr. West running as a third party candidate makes them uncomfortable or puts them in an uncomfortable position? Because now, considering Dr. West is someone that they admire and they really like, now it looks some kind of way if they don't support Dr. West because he's not running as a Democrat, even though he's running on those progressive policies that they championed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this exposes the fundamental contradiction of progressive Democrats that, where exactly are you going to go with this? How are you going to build a more powerful campaign than what Bernie Sanders had, where he had more volunteers, more grassroots support, more money than really one could ever hope for. And still he was slapped down twice. You look at Dennis Kucinich, where did he get on the debate stage? He was excluded from the debate stage and they kept changing the requirements so that he couldn't make it. He could never reach the threshold. And then they redistricted him so that he would be basically removed from Congress. And, you could look at, I'm forgetting his name, but the vice presidential candidate who ran with FDR, where they actually, Wallace, Henry Wallace, who was, really an out socialist and had a huge base of support. And they basically they called a fire emergency at the Democratic Convention in Chicago that year in order to prevent him from getting nominated. They will stop at nothing. And if a progressive does get in, then they won't support them anyhow, which happened once, George McGovern, where the Democratic Party basically withdrew their support. So this is not something new. And, we kind of know where we're going if we stay within the Democratic Party box. People are sick of it. They don't need convincing, just take a look at the polls and you will see that people are tearing their hair out. People are really, clamoring for another independent political choice, at least one other. And the numbers now show that twice as many people identify as politically independent or third party now as identify as either Democrat or Republican. So it's not like we have to compel people to think independently. People are already thinking independently. And for the institutions that carry the water for the Democratic Party, this is a very uncomfortable position for them. And they're trying to come up with reasons for basically to discredit a real fundamental political challenge. But if you don't challenge, we're just going to keep running in the same circle. And we are going over the waterfall right now. We do not have time to keep going through what's not working. Now, it's true, it's no walk in the park to, to build an independent party or a coalition of independent, non-corporate progressive parties. It's not easy, but there is no other way. And unless you do that, unless you draw a line in the sand and say, this is who we are, these are our values, you are destined to just build something and have it completely torn apart when that race is over. So where does it get you? Where did Bernie Sanders get? He was appointed head of the budget committee. How much good did that do him? He was able to propose a great bill, which then the Democratic leadership, tore apart. And what we got was the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically a fossil fuels first bill that does not do what it claims to do, and an infrastructure bill, which is essentially, it has some good things in it, but it's a privatization Trojan horse, and it's not going to do what the American public needs. These are all just giveaways, more giveaways to corporate America. So, what became of that huge revolution? You cannot have a revolution within a counter-revolutionary party. We've seen that over and over again. We need to draw a line in the sand, and then we need to build a party.
Well said. So one of the things that stood out to me, I interviewed Jared and Elizabeth Beck. They were the lawyers that filed the DNC fraud lawsuit after Bernie lost in 2016. And they are very, very bitter. Like when they came on, like you could just see it in their face. They are very bitter about the way that things transpired in reference to that lawsuit. Given the fact that we know that the DNC is a corporation, like they explained this very well, and they explained how Bruce Spiva, who was the attorney for the DNC, basically let them know that they did not have to give you a fair election because they're a corporation, and the DNC does not have to, make sure that the super delegates actually go to Bernie Sanders, even if he won like every county in West Virginia. So given that we know that information, why do you think people like RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson are still willing to try to run in the Democratic Party? And they know this information as well, because RFK Jr. told Russell Brand that he's like, look, I know it's rigged. I know they're going to give all the super delegates to Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. So why even go down that road? Why do you feel they don't want to take that same position that Dr. West has chosen?
I think it's like being in an abusive relationship. When you're in an abusive relationship, you tend to just take the demands of the abuser as the gospel. And I think this is a fundamental problem. I think it helps not to be financially secure. If you're financially secure, you have an incentive. There's a saying from Upton Sinclair, I think, the novelist, who was also like a socialist, that it's hard to convince a man of something when his livelihood depends on not knowing it. And so those who are comfortably situated in society, and it's more older generation, it's more white, it's more, professional managerial class, they are defending their turf here. And it's really hard to do that mindset change. That's why, political change is often coming up the age ladder, and as Gen Zs and millennials are coming up that ladder, they are not, I don't need to tell you, young people are not getting into secure niches in society. It's just not there. The jobs are really crappy, and and housing is unaffordable, totally unaffordable. So the things that one would expect to come with adulthood don't happen. You're just carrying student debt with you and having the rug pulled out from you in healthcare and housing and education and jobs and and air and water and the climate. It's like, how much worse can it get? Things are only getting worse and worse. And it's like kind of mind-boggling that an older and more secure generation can't see it. But, we're all flawed human beings, and we kind of carry around this screen, this filter. And so people tend to be very locked into their politics, the politics of their family or the politics that they grew up with. And the people who aren't, are, what should we say, the harbingers of the future that we need. And fortunately, public opinion has really changed. So it's no longer like that a radical rethinking, a transformative agenda. You don't really have to argue for it at all. I discovered that even in 2002 when I ran my first race and discovered, oh my God, the rebellion is already happening. We don't have to convince people. We just have to inform people that there is an option, and empower people to take control. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We have it. And people are living this crisis. They don't need to be convinced. That is, unless you're in the top 10 or 20%, you are living this crisis right now. And even if you are privileged, if you're looking at what's happening to everybody, the economy is really a drag on everybody. Our health crisis impacts everybody. A COVID epidemic impacts everybody. And the crashing and burning climate, and it's not just climate, it's every dimension of our environment, it's our water and our air and everything. You don't have to be convinced that there's a crisis here. And I think we're watching the empire really double down to force people, to saturate people with propaganda 24/7, coming through social media, coming through mainstream media, coming through the legacy press. In every way, people are being told to be good little boys and girls, or else something really terrible will happen. It's kind of voter extortion. Votes are being extorted from people out of fear. And what has the politics of fear delivered? Everything we were afraid of. We're having, just in enormous quantities. So it's really important for us to stand up based on our core values. As Martin Luther King said, the choice is between chaos or community. And we see chaos is just accelerating all around us. It's not going to get better without us. And to quote Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. So who is that demand going to come from, except us? We got to stand up and do it.
That's right. Now, Jill, you're Professor West, you're his campaign manager, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the questions that has come up, which a lot of us experienced with the Bernie Sanders movement, was that it was a movement, but the movement was to get Bernie Sanders elected, so to speak, right? So what we saw happen, particularly after 2020, after Bernie decided to, suspend like his campaign in 2020, the movement that Bernie Sanders built across this country had nowhere to go because Bernie lost that election, and then he just went back to being a senator and just seemed to kind of disappear in some of these larger grassroots movements that were happening in reference to like Medicare for All marches that we had across this country. Just seemed to kind of disappear in so many ways, and to just quickly come out and support Joe Biden for re-election and not the candidates that are running on progressive policies. I think it was a big mask off moment for Bernie Sanders. So a lot of people are not happy with Bernie Sanders. In reference to Dr. West's campaign, if Dr. West were not to win, would there be a movement for the voters to go back to? And how would you build that movement? Would it be, or would it involve something in reference to worker strike actions, et cetera, or mutual aid? That's some of the questions I think people are curious to know. Like, will we have something to go back to afterwards?
Yes, and I think you'll find that fleshed out as the campaign moves forward. But that's really very much what Dr. West has been saying from the get-go. This is really about building a broad social movement, giving it a political voice, but continuing to build the movement as we go. So I know he will be connecting with Workers Strike Back, that he will be connecting with Medicare for all. This isn't like new to him. It's like that's where he lives. So I'm finding people generally don't need to be convinced that Dr. West is going to be true to the movement. I think everything he does is going to be very much grounded in building the movement above all. And exactly what form that takes, we've been what should we say? We've been pretty preoccupied with just transforming his structure. It's way easier to launch and manage a campaign if you're starting from the beginning. If you have to undo the paperwork and the financial infrastructure and all that, it's way more complicated and involves a lot of lawyers and just incredible struggling with the FEC bureaucracy and rules to make this happen. So we haven't been able to go full bore yet on policies and field organizing and all that, but it's still quite early in the campaign. So I think we can look forward to that. And I really want to encourage people to go to the website, cornellwest24.org, and sign up and say what you want to say, give feedback, because we're reading all of it. And Dr. West is also seeing most of it. And people are, providing really great suggestions and are essentially taking the ball and running with it. So, for example, New Jersey, the New Jersey Green Party is, it's not, I always have to draw a line between the party and the campaigns, because the campaigns are not yet supported by the party. So I should say activists in the New Jersey Green Party. It's not the party. The party has to remain neutral until it's gone through a process. But activists are building right now a kind of a conference to bring together a lot of movement people. It's not just Greens, to just bring us together and look, and take this ball and run with it, because it's going to push the issues. It's going to change the presidential dialogue. And people don't have to be persuaded that Dr. West has, integrity and a track record, and we know where he stands and what he's going to do and what he's going to keep doing. So people are really excited, and they are going ahead and creating their own grassroots structures, which we will support from within the campaign. And, but you don't have to wait for us. We are, that is like the next part of the campaign that we will be building out and developing after we get sort of our FEC compliance and financial infrastructure all set up, and we have some breathing room. Then we're going to get down to building out the campaign. And I just want to invite people, to be a part of ballot access, or phone banking, or visibility, or outreach to key constituencies, people who are struggling at the workplace, or for healthcare, or battles over rent control and affordable housing. I mean, all of these issues are living in our communities. There are huge battles going on right here, and people very much need those battles to be lifted up and supported by a political voice and a political movement. So I'd say it's not different from what activists are doing right now.
So one of the things I do like about Dr. West is his position on the Israel-Palestine issue. I feel like he gets this right. And even though his opinion about this issue is not a popular one, and that's the thing, he's willing to stand up for something even if it's not popular. Obviously, we know that Harvard University chose not to give him tenure because he wanted to stand with the Palestinian people. Do you think that a position like Israel and Palestine and this war with Russia and Ukraine, do you see foreign policy, particularly those two issues, playing a big part in the presidential election for 2024, and why or why not?
When Dr. West talks about the campaign, he invariably puts abolishing poverty and ending endless wars and ending cop city or cop cities and mass incarceration. Those are always front and center. And then, he goes on to talk about reparations and healthcare and reproductive health and all of that. So, and the climate. So that's kind of like his sphere, but I always see him leading with demilitarization and a foreign policy that's based on international law, not on rules-based order, which is basically whatever the empire decides is the rule of the day, but rather on international law, human rights, and diplomacy. So he's consistent. He's been here, and I don't see him changing one iota. He is not ducking, and he is taking the heat, and all the heat that's coming at him for being a challenger outside of the parties of war on Wall Street. It's really just wonderful to see someone who is so grounded in, really the struggle of Black liberation and anti-colonialism. It's like he's really not fazed by the small things of campaigns. He's really very much grounded on the voices that he sees as his predecessors and continuing that message. So I don't see him bowing to political expediency at all.
Why do you feel like someone like RFK Jr., because I covered his campaign announcement when he was here in Boston. I covered it on the ground.
You did a great job. Yeah, really appreciated that.
Thank you. I was very surprised about because I was there for that. And so later on, when I found out about his position on Israel and Palestine, I was very, very, very surprised. I did not know that his uncle and his father had a similar position in reference to Israel. Like they didn't talk about that in the history textbooks in school. So I was very surprised that someone who is really great on the war issue in reference to foreign policy and imperialism, I was really surprised that he doesn't seem to have that same ideology in reference to Israel and Palestine. Do you think it's that he just really doesn't understand and needs to be educated on that issue, which someone like Max Blumenthal offered to do on the Gray Zone? Or do you think he does know, but he's afraid more so of the Israel lobby?
It's hard to get inside his head, and I can't say I know. All you can do is like watch what he does, and I'm waiting and watching and hoping that he will allow himself to be educated. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I don't have a thorough understanding of him. I have not studied him. There are many things I really like and respect about him. I don't agree with all of his policies, but I haven't studied all of them either. So I don't want to give him a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but just to say, I would be very interested in an ongoing conversation, except that he's in the Democratic Party. And to me, that is just like shooting yourself in the foot. So I don't see that he has a future, and he may stir up the dialogue, and that's great. And I'm really glad he's doing it. I'm glad that Marianne Williamson is doing it in her own way. I'm glad that they are challenging Democratic power, but I would not spend time on those campaigns myself, because we know where they go, and they're very unlikely to measure up to the standard of the Bernie Sanders campaigns, which were, I think, as powerful as you can get. They were more powerful than the front runners. In many ways, they were more powerful, but they will be sabotaged. So why waste your time? We don't have time to waste. Whether you're looking at the war in Ukraine and its continued acceleration, and now they're going to send cluster bombs because they're that desperate, because I want to call it the surge. It's it's just another name for another public relations campaign to pretend that things are going to change. It's not the surge, it's the counter offensive. They're just trying to drag this out. What for? I mean, this is like the craziest war that really has nothing to offer the American people, and there are so many reasons not to be doing it, but it keeps progressing, going down this slippery slope towards nuclear Armageddon. We don't have much time. We need a ceasefire, and we need a diplomatic process to begin right now, and you won't hear mention of that in the Democratic and Republican establishment. A little bit from some Republicans, but it's sort of very arbitrary and not exactly sincere or grounded in a broader policy perspective. But it's so clear. Yeah, I mean, the war is murderous and the war is illegal, including Russia's part in it. But the war actually began way before that with a much bigger and more murderous game plan, which you could call full spectrum dominance on the part of the USA, which was really declared formally as early as 1990, approximately, where we said we will not tolerate rising powers and competitors, not militarily, not economically, not politically. We will crush them, whether they are friend or foe. This is not allowed. So the US has really been, if you just scratch below the surface, it's very clear that the US has had a consistent policy, certainly since the 90s, to basically prevent Russia's rise. I mean, look at what happened when we orchestrated the election of Boris Yeltsin, who basically just privatized the wealth and resources. That was really our doing, and we wanted Russia to stay there. And damn Putin, comes along and says, no, you can't do this to us, and helped sort of get Russia back on its feet, which was very alarming to the US. But, even from before Yeltsin's time, we were dead set on, in fact, Clinton made a deal with Yeltsin to hold off on NATO expansion so that he wouldn't, interfere with Yeltsin's reelection campaign that the US got fully behind. But you can go back even before the 1990s. You can look at what happened after the Second World War. And don't take my word for it. Go to the US National Archives, where it's very well documented by a congressional research effort to hold Nazis accountable after the Second World War. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's been very well documented by Consortium News, and maybe you've been talking about it as well. But we had a policy that was only revealed, I think, in like 2010 thereabouts. It was held back because it's so explosive that the CIA was cultivating Ukrainian Nazis and brought them back to the US in order to conduct a terrorism campaign and false flags and so on, in order to incriminate Russians in Ukraine, and to basically promote this divide, and the internal conflict between Russia and Ukraine, going way back, post Second World War. This was going on. Mm-hmm. So there's a long history here. You don't want to just start the clock on February 22nd or whatever it was in 2022. The war had a long history, and you can't solve one part of the crisis here. You can't solve the conflict just by looking at Russia's, incursion into Ukraine, which was a terrible thing. It's causing, just horrors and devastation. But it was a response to ongoing horrors and devastation, fundamentally promoted by the US and its allies. So we need a big solution here. We need a big solution that protects Ukraine above all, because they're the ones who are really the sacrificial lamb, and it's just awful to see. The solution has to involve all the players here who are really, carving up and murdering and pillaging across the planet. Ukraine is, as horrible as it is it doesn't really hold a candle to Afghanistan, where we were there for 20 years, or to Iraq, or to Libya, the ongoing conflict in Syria. So, the problem here is fundamentally the US game plan, an empire that will, go stop at nothing in order to maintain its stranglehold on power. Now that's coming to an end for external reasons as well, because there is a power shift going on. We're now living in a multipolar world. So for our own benefit, let alone the rest of the world, we need to get with the program here, and we need to re-elevate international law, because if it's strictly the whim of the dominant player, we are not going to be in that dominant player for very much longer. We need to be viewing this as kind of a team player here, because we're all players and we got to have something that works for all of us. Enough kind of approaching foreign policy as if it's just who's the latest bully in the schoolyard. That doesn't work. Elliot Abram does not belong. I mean, what a joke. And what does that say about Biden? That he's appointing the arch villain of foreign policy to diplomacy. This is like laughable, sick, pathological. And to me, it just confirms why we're doing what we're doing and why we need a voice like Dr. West's, whose specialty really is speaking to people from the heart and bringing people together. Everybody's his brother. Everybody, he'll call you a gangster, and he'll call you his brother. He does that kind of, or sister. He's kind of indiscriminate in calling things out, but always building a bridge and like trying to affirm the humanity. And if you look at people who really have experience in diplomacy, if you listen to like what Jeffrey Sachs says, he's been around the block on this a few times. He says, diplomats really have to approach this as a human situation. I think that's part of the problem, is that you have all these psychopaths in the political system, and who are trying to conduct diplomacy when they're just like kind of rotten to the core. They don't know what it means to have an equitable relationship. They're not the people you want your lives to depend on here. We need a really transformation of our political system, so it is not being bought and paid for by a very sick corporate culture of the economic elite.
That's right. There seems to be a plan for a summer of strikes. We're going to pivot a little bit to labor here, because I'm sure you've heard UPS may possibly go on strike at the end of this month. So there's that. There's the LA hotel strikes that are happening right now. And then you also have this issue with Cop City, which I'm glad you mentioned as well, which I think could be just an intro to the possibility of us having more cop cities in the future, and not just Atlanta. Do you see the Dr. West campaign getting involved in reference to some of these labor strikes that are about to happen, and also a cop city as well?
Absolutely. And he always is, and always has been very connected with the labor movement, and with protests of all sorts, but especially, standing up for our much abused First Amendment rights, for press freedom, for freedom of speech, and the right to protest, which is just being savaged all over the place, and, protesters, climate protesters have been charged as terrorists now for quite some time. There's one woman who trespassed, in relation to an oil pipeline, and is in jail now for 7 or 8 years. I mean, there's just been draconian stuff going on, and it's not only the right of protest, it's also, Julian Assange, and just our right to know what government is doing in our name, and all these things go together. And Dr. West, to his credit, has been very outspoken and on the ground, and he's an activist and doesn't hesitate to be on the front lines and get arrested himself. So, he's going to keep on being who he is. And, what other candidates are doing that now? I haven't seen any others that are out there on the front lines, and that's just who he is. We are beginning to draw up those plans right now to, identify when and what he's going to do and where he'll be when and so on. So stay tuned and, go to his website and get on the newsletter updates and be a part of the revolution, because it's here.
Awesome. Well said, Jill. In reference to the Green Party, because I think this is another question that has come my way a couple of times. We realize there seems to be a Howie Hawkins faction of the Green Party. And I think Howie Hawkins, his position in reference to, let's say, this war with Russia and Ukraine, I do not agree with. I know a lot of people don't agree with as well. Has there been any type of pushback or hesitancy in reference to Dr. West running through the Green Party in reference to that Howie Hawkins faction of the Green Party? And if so, how do you feel that can change or shift in the future?
Well, my sense, and let me just say, I think that faction associated with Howie Hawkins is very, very small. So we had a vote in March, I think, related to the, maybe it was April, I don't recall, but there were two rallies, the Rage Against the Machine, and then there was the Fund People, Not the War Machine. And the anti-war sentiment basically won out in both, but in the second event, where we had a lot of dialogue and the question was much clearer, it wasn't kind of embedded in kind of other related political issues, it was much more clearly about war. Howie's faction got, I think, like 8 votes, and the anti-war faction got like 90 votes. So Howie's faction is tiny now and really does not have clout or influence. Most people profoundly disagree with him. That's not everybody, but it's most people. So I don't think that Hawkins, faction is a thing, really. And I've also heard secondhand, but this was based on statements he made in his podcast, that he was seriously considering not running and sort of withdrawing his plans to run because he basically supports Cornell. And while Howie supports weaponizing Ukraine and supposedly defending human rights in Ukraine, he's kind of a victim of that propaganda campaign, this sort of false human rights campaign that would have us drop bombs, to defend human rights. His faction, his ideas, that's kind of like where the problem is. He supports the dismantling of NATO. Well, I shouldn't say that it's entirely confined to that one issue in Ukraine, because he tends to want to beat back against these authoritarians. He's quick to accept Department of Defense talking points about authoritarians and how we have to fight them and stand up to them. He was a Marine himself, and he just seems to have absorbed some of that mindset. So that aside, I think he basically agrees with Cornel West's platform across the board. So I don't see major opposition within the Green Party at this point. There are always a few people, who will be naysayers, but I don't see anything really substantive out there. And what I do see is a huge mobilization, which is really exciting on behalf of Dr. West right now.
One thing I would add in reference to like the West campaign that I think a lot of people, especially those of us in independent media, but just in general, the censorship issue is a huge issue for a lot of people. I'm sure you saw, as with the case with the Twitter files, a lot of information came out into reference to how the federal government the FBI and CIA agencies were trying to censor people through the use of the Twitter executives. So this is an issue that I think RFK Jr. is really, really good on, is the censorship and calling for no censorship. That is one thing I would add or recommend in reference to the West campaign, to have some type of position on where does he stand in reference to the censorship, whether it's Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, etc. And that's an issue I think that basically spreads across all political ideologies.
Yeah, totally. And if you have any intentions of being a third party or independent candidate, if you're not at war with censorship, then you're just saying, bring it on, silence me and lock me out, because who is more the target really than the left? So I definitely see, him aligning with that point of view. And Chris Hedges, who is very much, very articulate on this stuff. Chris Hedges is one of the core advisors on the campaign. So I don't think there's any way this is gonna, escape the major talking points of this campaign. And I will say myself, as someone that Matt Taibbi clarified that Julian Assange and I are in the same bucket. We're as far as Twitter is concerned. So, I consider this, just it's kind of a life or death issue. How can we have? How can we ever hold government accountable? If voices are being silenced, and it's critics like us who will be on the firing line of the censorship. So we really have to take a very clear point of view and allow opinions that we may not like. That just comes with the territory. You have to allow a diversity of opinions to be heard. And we need it.
Who do you think will be, if you had to guess, who do you think would be his running mate, or who do you think would be a good option for that?
To tell you the truth, I've been so anchored in the minutia of just kind of getting the campaign up and running. I haven't had to go there to think about it, but, it's not hard to think of people who would really, flesh out the ticket. And we're getting suggestions all across the map. So, I'll just say, if people have ideas you're excited about, definitely let us know and put a comment on the website, and, we'll get there eventually. We're not there yet, but we will.
I think it should be either you or a Jamu Baraka.
That's a very interesting idea.
All right, Jill. Well, really quick before you go, can you just remind everyone again, how can people get involved with his campaign?
So go to cornellwest24.org, and you will be on his website, and then you can either volunteer or you can just insert a comment, and then you can decide whether your comment will be public or not too, and and then take it from there. Our ballot access drives are underway right now. We have teams that are working in Alaska and New Jersey, and maybe some others as well. And we have a ballot access manager that is Rick Lass, who's the same guy. He's this wonderful, talented, very uplifting kind of team player who got us on 47 ballots in 2016. And he is managing the campaign. And so we have now, I think it's like 600 or 700, it might even be up to 800 volunteers for ballot access specifically. And there are thousands of volunteers who have signed up, many more thousands who have just plugged into the website as supporters. Dr. West's Twitter account right now is what we're using. We don't have a separate campaign social media, but we will eventually. But you can go to his Twitter page as well, at Dr. Cornell West. and you'll see this gorgeous artwork that was created by Mr. Fish. I don't know if anybody has seen that, but it's worth taking a look. And we put it out, and now we're seeing it all over the internet, and people are making t-shirts and, just going to town. And we're going to be doing this regularly. So, I just say, welcome and join the team, and we're here for you. So, join the campaign, and it's going to be unlike, I think, any other campaign that you've been a part of. It is for me already, I have to say. So it's really wonderful. And there's such a sense of spirit. I mean, I'm sure there was in the Sanders campaign too, but there's kind of like a whole different demographic here. It's like the people who just weren't sure about Sanders and weren't sure they could trust him. Or maybe they tried it, and then got really discouraged. But there are 80 million people who didn't vote in 2020, largely of color, young, and low income. And there is a home for this movement now for justice. And, as Dr. West says, justice is what love looks like in public. And he's just, a really delightful shining light for where we have to go and how we can go there together and just have a wonderful community that we're building in the process. And so come and join it.
Awesome. Jill, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sabby. Really great talking with you. And I look forward to the next time.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. And here is that artwork that Jill was referring to. It is really nice, huh? So it says, "Let us fight and build together in the name of truth and justice." And you can see the artwork here. Yeah, that one is really nice. It says Cornel West 24, people before profits. PBP. You down with PBP? Yeah, you know me. That could be a t-shirt too, huh? You down with PBP? Yeah, you know me. Awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. So I hope that was informative to you guys. I have 3 more stories we're going to cover today. But first, I want to go ahead and make sure I shout out patrons, super chats, and then we'll get into those other stories. So hang on. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. Don't forget about those Sabbies. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Heidi Denver and Kent Smith. Welcome. And thank you guys so much. Alrighty, let's dive into those super chats and then we'll get into the other stories. Shout out to Perry. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Thank you, Marcos. What are some policies on Cornell's platform? So we did go through those today, but then also if you watch the interview that I had with Dr. West, like we ran through the policies as well, but Jill also said they'll have all that flushed out shortly. So we'll go back to that as well, but we did go through some of those. Thank you for the super sticker, Perry. Thank you for the super chat with Our Eyes Rise. Join our global daily peace party. From anywhere on earth for 9 seconds, we face Mount Kenya and meditate in or pray for global peace. Daylight hours, only green lovers dream. Interesting. Thanks so much for that. And thank you, all one same. Repeating Joey's question, who is the volunteer coordinator? There are tons of folks waiting to help build the campaign. Yeah, so if you go to the website, I know Eric put it in the chat a couple of times, and sign up, what I would imagine would happen is you would receive that information via email. So that's how they'll communicate with you. So sign up on the website is the first step. Shout out to Dex Conaway for becoming a Sabby member. Thank you so much. And let's give Dex a big whoop, whoop. Welcome, Dex. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Use bully pulpit to push states of 23 more states to place amendments before their voters to give option. I don't know if that's supposed to be to give more or, okay, to give option to place their own amendments on ballot for ratification. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for the super sticker, Perry. Thank you for the super chat, Marcos. We need Cornell in the streets with protesters today. Well, it sounds like he will be. I know he is going to Cop City. I know that's one of the ones that he has said he's expected to be at. So just keep that in mind. Thank you for the super sticker, What K Qua? Thank you for that. And thank you for this super chat, Marcos. Tulsi for VP would extend his reach. I'm not sure that Tulsi would. I would see, I get where you're coming from, but I would see her more aligned with someone like RFK Jr. I would see her a part of that platform, not so much a part of Cornell West platform because of the policies. Robin says that was a really informative interview. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dwayne. Great interview with Jill. Thank you. Okie doke. Let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail, shall we? It feels weird being live at this time for me, but welcome. Okay. Tonight we are discussing, of course, Jill Stein was just here to talk about Dr. West's campaign and the Green Party, etc. We're also going to discuss RFK Jr. and Russell Brand censorship. We're going to get into that conversation that RFK Jr. just had recently with Russell Brand. And I think you're going to want to hear this because they also cover funding, which I think some of you had questions about in reference to RFK Jr.'s campaign. We're also going to discuss Marjorie Taylor Greene removed. Yikes. What happened there? What did MTG do? And last but not least, a different type of story for this show, but we're going to discuss this issue that has happened with Keke Palmer. She's an actress, and a lot of the flack that her boyfriend and herself are getting over the internet, but we're also going to focus on the larger issue at hand there. So I think that'll be an interesting discussion. But first, let's get into this story about Marjorie Taylor Greene. So if you are not aware, apparently Marjorie Taylor Greene was removed from the Freedom Caucus. Now, the Freedom Caucus is what I would say is like the equivalent to the Squad in the Democratic Party, but they're in the Republican Party. They are the ones that decided to withhold their vote for Kevin McCarthy as Speaker unless they received some concessions. Actually, there were a couple members that didn't want him at all, whether they got the concessions or not. But so I guess to that point, the Freedom Caucus has fought harder than the Squad has. They've actually been able to win some concessions. Marjorie Taylor Greene was a part of that faction of the Republican Party in DC, and she has now been removed from that party. But I wonder why. Let's get into this clip here from MSNBC. What did she do?
Speaking of Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, she may have been kicked out of the far-right House Freedom Caucus. The caucus voted 2 weeks ago on Greene's membership, and an NBC News source familiar with those deliberations says the vote to oust her was overwhelming. Discontent with Greene among the members had been growing since she backed Kevin McCarthy's bid for House Speaker.
Let's pause here for a second because I actually predicted this when this happened, that this was going to be an issue. So this is a little clip here or an image here when they were trying to vote for Speaker. And if you remember correctly, there were people like Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz that decided, no, we're not going to vote for Kevin McCarthy. We want these concessions. Marjorie Taylor Greene folded pretty early. Now, if you remember correctly, this vote went on for a couple of days, which is what we actually asked the Squad to do in reference to holding their vote for Nancy Pelosi in reference to Medicare for All. We asked them to do this, like, no, don't vote for her without getting concessions for the people, right? So I predicted back then that this might be an issue later on because she was able to fold so quickly and split away from the party. So that issue comes back up into the light. But is that the reason why she was removed?
But it reportedly was this altercation with Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert last month that put members over the edge. The vote to kick her out was 2 days later. Despite this, Green still has not officially been removed from the Freedom Caucus. That's because caucus chairman Scott Perry could not schedule a meeting with her, despite numerous attempts before and after the vote to oust her. NBC News reports in an interview Thursday night, a House Freedom Caucus board member said Perry had made a number of attempts to reach Green and her staff before and after the vote to oust her. Quote, I suspect because she knew she was being dismissed from the Freedom Caucus, and a little bit like someone refusing service from a legal standpoint. If I'm not served, then maybe it doesn't take effect. Green's team refuted that claim in a statement and called out the member for remaining anonymous. In a statement, she wrote, I serve Northwest Georgia first and serve no group in Washington.
Let's pause here and look at this statement for just a second. In Congress, I serve Northwest Georgia first and serve no group in Washington. So this is MTG letting you know that it's about what her constituents want. And this is why someone like her can get reelected. People need to pay attention to this, right? For as much as we complain about the Freedom Caucus members, there's a reason why they were reelected. There's a reason why their constituents continue to support them and to vote for them, because they're doing what their constituents, for the most part, what they want, what they elected them to do, right? So this is her saying, look, I am not a part of any type of cult-like behavior. I am not, beholding to like just one group. I'm here to represent my constituents, and that's pretty much it. Let's go on.
So a lot to pick through there, Jen Palmieri. You've talked not so long ago on the surface with Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman there. Obviously, she is her own brand. She is her own thing. She's right about that when she says she doesn't belong to a group. What is the significance of this, if there is any?
I mean, first of all, we should clock this moment that Marjorie Taylor Greene has been kicked out of the House Freedom Caucus. They did say in that story, they said that part of the problem was the altercation she had with Lauren Boebert, which, by the way, was a fight over who gets to file impeachment articles against Joe Biden, who gets to do that first.
Right.
Right. So note that.
But they didn't think that MTG was an issue when she was chasing down people. Remember the first year that she was elected? I think it was the first month she was there. Remember, she was chasing down protesters and tapping them on the back. You guys remember that? They didn't think she was a problem then. This is interesting.
But it wasn't just that. They said, Andy Biggs from the House Freedom Caucus said it was, her role in the debt limit fight with House Freedom Caucus was unhappy. They thought that deal was too moderate. Her backing of Speaker McCarthy early on in January, when there was 15 ballots to try to find a speaker, that he lumped all of that together, which sort of comes out as she's too establishment for us. Okay.
Ouch. And it comes back to the money. They feel that MTG is too establishment. Maybe she's gotten a little bit cozy with some of the Republicans that have a lot of big donors. Remember when she was on Rising, when Bree interviewed her and they talked about dollar donations, Bree did ask her, well, do you think that corporate money should be removed, et cetera? Marjorie Taylor Greene said most of her donations come from individual people, and it's not like people are giving individual $1,000 like donations to her. It's like the small dollar donations that like Bernie Sanders had. But now other members of the Freedom Caucus feel that she is starting to become more cozy with the establishment. Now, why would that happen? This is why I tell you got to always follow the money. Why would that happen? Could it be in an effort to try to preserve her career in politics? we need to pay attention to this.
So that's a moment to consider. And then having spent, I spent a week in her district. I've spent time with her on a few occasions, and the House Freedom Caucus is not marginalizing Marjorie Taylor Greene. You know, just as when she lost her committee assignments under Democratic Congress, she will find a way to use this moment to her advantage. And, you know, as I said earlier, talking about the sort of connection, human connection that Trump has with his base, Marjorie Taylor Greene has that with the MAGA base.
Her constituents, for the most part, really like her, believe it or not. They really like her. There's a reason why she was reelected. You see what I mean? So she's doing something right in reference to what her constituents want, but in the reference to how she'll find a way to make this about her, I see the book coming right now. Marjorie Taylor Greene writes, "Removed and kicked out. My time in the Freedom Caucus." Next thing you know, it'll be a Lifetime movie. I can see it all. I can see it all. I'm telling you.
And there's no one in the House Freedom Caucus that raises more money for Republican candidates than Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm certain of that. And she has, because she bled for the cause. She was kicked out of her committee assignments by Democrats, and that helped her form a connection with the MAGA base that the House Freedom Caucus is not going to be able to touch. And then she has done a pretty good job at playing this inside game with McCarthy. And, you know, it's another statement of where we are with the House Republican Caucus, that she's playing a role as a leader within figuring out a way to do that within McCarthy's world and the establishment.
Is the MAGA movement going to side with MTG? Are they going to follow with her, or are they going to stick with the rest of the members in the Freedom Caucus? I'm curious to know. Are people going to move with MTG? We'll have to see.
Also, the whole play of "you can't fire me if I won't take a meeting with you," that feels a very like George Costanza, Seinfeld. I'm pretty sure he did that. But to Willie, it is though beyond Marjorie Taylor Greene, who of course, as Jen says, will remain a force in the Republican Party, and this highlights this fracture that she's not conservative enough. But I also want to go back to how we opened this with President Biden calling out that groundbreaking. This is something that the White House is really trying to lean into. They did a little bit early on in his term, and now this year, when there's not going to be new legislation passed, rather sort of touting the victories that they've already accomplished, he's going to these districts and
what victories? He just said the victories he's already accomplished. What victories? I told you, they never tell you what those accomplishments are.
something that the White House is really trying to lean into. They did a little bit early on in his term, and now this year, when there's not going to be new legislation passed, rather sort of touting the victories that they've already accomplished, he's going to these districts and talking about Republicans, calling out Republicans who are taking credit for things, for projects in their districts that they didn't vote for. They frankly opposed. They didn't.
Isn't Joe Biden doing the same thing? Isn't he taking credit for things that he hasn't done? Oh my God, the buffoonery.
Cast their ballots for the infrastructure bill. And it's one thing to do it at MTG's deep red district and Congressman Wilson's deep red South Carolina district yesterday. But the White House is also going to be doing this I'm told, by aides there, in these battleground districts, these swing districts, for Republicans who won seats in districts that Biden captured in 2020. And that right there, the White House believes could be a real pressure point and could potentially help them try in their efforts to get back the House in 2020. Let's remember, they only need to pick up a handful of seats, and a few of those battlegrounds that could do it.
He's already losing in swing states. This is what they leave out. He's already losing in swing states. Look at the polls. How you let Donald Trump beat you by 7 points right now? Donald Trump, like with all the controversy surrounding Donald Trump, it's just crazy. But what is going to be interesting to see is What is going to happen with MTG? Is it true that she's trying to align herself more with that Kevin McCarthy faction of the Republican Party? Because that is where money is. Like, let's just be real. There's more money on that side than it is on that Freedom Caucus side. Is that what she's trying to do? Is she trying to look out for her political career? We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Leroy says, would have been great if members of the squad called each other out like this. I know it's all theater, but it's still happening. Would have been great when they decided to become scabs or strike breakers, and Rashida Tlaib was the only one that did not vote that way. Would have been great if Rashida Tlaib stepped up and said, I'm calling out AOC, Jamal Bowman, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, all of you. I'm calling out all of you for not backing the workers. Would have been great, wouldn't it? In another world. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on to our second story. Now, this story is about RFK Jr.'s interview that he had with Russell Brand. Now, he's been on Russell Brand's show before, but this one I feel is a little bit more policy specific in reference to RFK Jr.'s presidential race. One of the issues that is brought up is censorship. We'll get to that one in just a second. But I want to focus on the issue that he brings up before that, which is the funding. Now, some of you have asked questions about this before. Where is the money going in reference to RFK Jr.'s campaign? Who are, the donors? Like, is he taking corporate money? Those types of questions. And I think you're going to get an answer to that now. So let's go ahead and dive in there.
If you are willing to and able to, and if there is any value in, because I would say there is, to say, like, it seems that what I can infer from what you are saying is that you would not accept donations from corporations, whilst I acknowledge it's likely. I mean, been speaking to Jack Dorsey, who I know is donating to your campaign, and
we're just going to pause for just a second because Russell Brand asked like really long questions. So we're going to pause. We're going to pause in between the questions so I can just break some things down, because sometimes by the time he gets to the end of the question, people forgot, like, wait, what was the question? So he's asking him about the type of donations he's willing to take for his campaign. Like, is he going to basically refuse to take corporate donations for his campaign? He pointed out that Jack Dorsey, who is the former CEO of Twitter, has also donated to RFK Jr.'s campaign. So that's where we are right now. Before he finishes this question, I just wanted to break that part down.
In a sense, it would be self-effacing and self-destructive not to accept money from well-intentioned, wealthy individuals. I think what we're talking about is, will your campaign end up being funded by the very interests that are ultimately...
I want to go back to this point. I'm sorry. When he mentions the individuals, because I'm not sure I agree with that.
Because I would say there is, to say, like, it seems that what I can infer from what you are saying is that you would not accept donations from corporations, whilst I acknowledge it's like...
Oh, sorry. I didn't go back far enough. I'm sorry, guys. Anyone watching this, if they have ADD, they're probably like, well, she just get the shit figured out. Sorry. I'm sorry.
I wonder if you are willing to and able to, and if there is any value in, because I would say there is, to say, like, it seems that what I can infer from what you are saying is that you would not accept donations from corporations, whilst I acknowledge it's likely. I mean, been speaking to Jack Dorsey, who I know is donating to your campaign, and in a sense, it would be self-effacing and self-destructive not to accept money from well-intentioned, wealthy individuals.
I don't know if I agree with that, Russell. And I want to give a couple examples. Wealthy individuals that I don't think is a good idea to accept donations from. Do you think it's a good idea, you guys, to take donations from George Soros? Individual donations. Do you think it's a good idea to accept an individual donation from Larry Fink, who owns BlackRock? Do you think it's a good idea to accept an individual donation from Bill Gates, who's buying up all this farmland from people? who made a big profit off of the pandemic? Do you think it's a good idea to accept an individual donation from, let's say, the CEO of Raytheon? You see where I'm going with this? So you do have to be careful. Now, Jack Dorsey was the CEO of Twitter. Now he's working on another site that's supposed to be an alternative to Twitter. I don't know about that just yet. But so I don't know who Jack Dorsey is in bed with. So someone like him may be okay. But I think that we have to be careful if we make a generalization that it's okay to accept a donation from a wealthy individual, because you really have to look at who that individual is connected to. So I think I disagree with Russell on that one.
I think what we're talking about is, will your campaign end up being funded by the very interests that are ultimately perpetuating these problems? The kind of people that are, I mean, it's unlikely that Big Pharma are going to be donating, but are you... Other than conversationally and by virtue of your history, your personal history, I'm talking about as a lawyer, your cases against Monsanto, your campaigning against corruption in the pharmaceutical industry, are you saying that as president, you would be pushing legislation to, for example, demonopolize big tech to break up censorship, ban the political parties from receiving these type of donations in the manner you have described from that famous legislation 100 years ago? Would you nationalize and break up big pharma and perhaps make the health industry, which seems like a sort of, in a sense, even referring to health as an industry seems wrong. What kind of commitments to get money out of politics, to control big pharma meaningfully, and to break up censorship, break down this censorship complex, particularly as we have the EU passing regulations that will mean they'll be able to fine platforms up to 6% of their turnover that do not obey their censorship edicts. The Five Eyes countries all passing similar, curiously simultaneous bills to perform a similar function, which I believe actually, Bobby, are to prevent figures like you having the traction and ability to campaign without passing through mainstream media.
I just have to pause for just a second because I don't want people to get lost. So you see the look on RFK Jr.'s face. He has this look on his face like, man, I wish you just get to the point. And I love Russell Brand, but I just want to break this up for just a second. He is now asking him, how does he feel basically about getting corporate money out of electoral politics? And now he's bringing in the censorship element to this as well, and why mainstream media may be trying to either censor RFK Jr. or smear him.
Gatekeepers. It seems to me that you have a unique opportunity to say, I will govern differently and I will address exactly these issues. I will not be accepting military industrial complex money. I will control big pharma. How close to that are you willing to go, Bob? Given some of the mad, crazy shit you've already said publicly, seems you might as well go the whole hog.
I personally don't think military, MIC, like the contractors and stuff like that, like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, I don't think that those companies would donate to RFK Jr. because he's anti-war. So I don't see them being the ones to do that. And I don't see big pharma, like Blue Cross Blue Shield or any of them saying, let me donate to RFK Jr.'s campaign. I don't think those two that he mentioned, I do not see reaching out to him and saying, hey, let me, donate to your campaign. But there are other corporations out there that still could, which I think should be mentioned. You have to be very careful because the way that they do this, and Eric, thank you so much. I flagged this. The way that they do this, Eric says it's tricky because they don't donate large amounts directly. They do it through super PACs, etc., under the radar. This is what you have to be very careful about. So those two examples that he gave, I don't see them trying to donate to RFK Jr. via super PAC or anything. They probably don't want anything to do with that campaign. But other corporations could. And that's what people need to pay attention to, right? So it's the ones that, like Eric said, they kind of fly under the radar. It's like, it may be Alphabet Group, for example. Alphabet Inc., which Google is a part of, they donate to a lot of Democrat politicians and Democrat candidates, including people like Ro Khanna, right? So you have to be careful, because what they'll do, if you look him up on Open Secrets when it gets closer to the election, if you see a company like Alphabet Group or whatever, if you don't look up what that is, some people don't even know like what that is, right? So they're ones that usually donate to Democrat politicians. You can look up different politicians in DC right now on Open Secrets, and you'll see a lot of them have donations from Alphabet Inc. So that's not, that's not one of the ones that's unusual. That one's very common. But then there's also this issue, which I brought up with Jill Stein. Like, do we think that he just doesn't know in reference to the Israel-Palestine conflict and needs to be educated on it? Or do you think he's afraid of the Israel lobby? And you have to be conscious of that particular group as well. Because what I want to say is that he could get donations from the Israel lobby in the form of a PAC. And so you may not even realize that that's what that is unless you dig a little bit deeper. And we've seen this before too with other Democrat politicians, people like, I always forget this guy's name, and this is really bad. Tory, who's the guy in New York City? He's annoying. He's progressive. They call him progressive, but he's not really progressive, but I'll get back to it. I always forget his name. It's like I can see his face, but he's very much pro like Israel lobby, that kind of thing. Hakeem Jeffries, that's another one. Like you may see they may get donations from a PAC or something like that. So it may not say that person's name, but that doesn't mean they're not getting that money. So if I was Russell Brand, instead of bringing up the military industrial complex and Big Pharma, because they're not going to try to donate to him, I would have brought up, what about organizations like J Street? What about the Israel lobby? Like I would have asked him about them, or I would have asked him about some of these tech corporations maybe trying to reach out and donate. Richie Torres. Thank you, Eric. Yes, Richie Torres is another one that loves that. He doesn't hide it. He's very proud about it, that he takes that money. So I think the thing is that he's bringing up two examples that don't really fit with RFK Jr.'s campaign to begin with. You got to bring up the ones that do. And he has told you publicly that he supports Israel, the state of Israel, in this issue with Israel and Palestine. So I would have asked about that lobby. Let's go.
I don't think I'm going to be getting a lot of corporate money. I think I've alienated, most of the donors from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. So, and
see, so he's able to answer it that way because those were the examples that Russell Brand gave. That's why I would have given different examples.
My campaign is essentially crowdsourced. We've raised over the past 3 days $1 million a day from $10, $20 donations, people giving them to us. I think that's probably how we're going to end up funding the campaign. In terms of fixing the system, Russell, it's hard because you have a Supreme Court decision that equates, monetary contributions with speech. And you know what? To me, I've been campaigning against Citizens United case since it was passed. I forget it was 2006 or 2008, but I think it may have been 2006, and I may have misspoke earlier. But I think it's one of the worst things, one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in history, because I think it's really changed the nature of politics in our country. And I'm going to figure out every way I can to work around it. And that may be through publicly financed campaigns, but that is a major preoccupation with me.
That should be a priority. Publicly financing campaigns. That should be a definite, I wouldn't even sit back and think, oh, I wonder if that's something we should pursue. No. That should be a yes, because the reason why most of the politicians don't actually do anything for the American people in this country is because they're all bought and paid for. They've been sold off to Blue Cross Blue Shield. They've been sold off to Raytheon. They've been sold off to Alphabet Group. They don't really belong to us, even though we're their constituents. They support their donors, the people who are giving them money that help them continue to become reelected. So that shouldn't even be a doubt. That's a big thing. Like, I would say, yes, these campaigns need to be publicly financed. And there are other countries that do it this way, right? So when Claire Daly was on this show, she explained to me the reason why they were able, like people like her and Mick were able to win and get into office as independents is because they don't have this issue with corporate money in their elections in a country like Ireland. They don't have to deal with that. You see what I mean? It's publicly funded. They don't have to. So that's how you weed out some of that corruption. So I would put that as a yes, a definite yes.
In terms of, what was your other question in terms of
censorship and how to ensure? Yeah.
So I'm very alarmed with what the European countries are doing right now, because it's completely anti-democratic. And now you're going to have the countries censoring dissent about government policies, which is not a function of democracy. That is clearly a characteristic of totalitarian regimes.
Just going to pause there for just a second. An example of that is France right now. I don't know if you guys have heard, but President Macron has made a statement that he's basically trying to censor people in France who are trying to get the word out about the protests that have been happening there. So he's trying to censor that information so that more of it doesn't go out. I mean, obviously, a lot of it has already gone out. Let's just be real. But that's a problem. Why can't the French people talk about what's happening in their country? So that's how far some of the overreach some of these leaders in other countries have right now. I don't want people to hear about bad things happening in France, so I'm going to censor you guys. That's dangerous.
There's never been a time in history when the people who were censoring free speech and books and burning books were good guys. They're always the bad guys. And if you give the government the power to do that, that power will be 100% of cases, that power is going to be abused. And I think, there's all these excuses to do it now because things are being blamed on this, this tsunami of misinformation that's out there. But the remedy for bad information is not censorship; it's more information, as you said. It is a vibrant, fierce debate about information with no holds bars, with no with no restrictions, and we have to do that now. In our country, I think we're blessed to have Elon Musk here, and also Jack Dorsey, who are willing to take a multi-billion-dollar hit in order to, and also just the hatred and vitriol from people who should love them, in order to maintain Twitter as a oasis of free speech in this growing ocean of censorship. And
I'll give Elon credit, for the Twitter files, but at the same time, Elon's still trying to make a profit. That's why he's telling people to pay for Twitter. So Elon's still trying to get those pockets full, Bobby.
So I hopefully we'll continue to do that. As soon as I get in office, I'm going to issue a series of executive orders and national security orders ordering government agencies and government officials, any federal government employee, to refrain from any kind of participation in any censorship. I'm going to restore the Smith-Mundt Act, which was the act that made it illegal for intelligence agencies or military agencies to propagandize American people. I'm going to bring the big tech titans, the big CEOs, into a meeting in the White House. And I'm going to have an all-day or 2-day or 3-day seminar if we have to figure out how we can do, how they're going to continue to run their sites and to make sure, that things that are not protected speech, like and incitement of violence, those are not protected speech under the First Amendment. Those legally you can censor, or fraud you can censor without it being incursions on the First Amendment or free speech rights. I'm going to ask them, how do we do this? And the back.
So this is huge. This is huge. What he would do in reference to censorship. Stop those government agencies from censoring these platforms like Twitter, YouTube. I mean, we already saw some of that. We talked about it last night with the federal judge that came out against the Biden administration and said, no, you cannot tell Twitter or any of these platforms what they can and cannot, or who they can and cannot have on there, or suppress people, that kind of thing. So this is really huge, this piece about the censorship. Now, I expected him to have this position either way, because he's one of the people that has been heavily censored. He's talked about this before, but this is huge. And that's why I mentioned this to Jill Stein when she was here a couple minutes ago, is that is one thing that I would recommend in reference to Dr. West's campaign. You really got to go in on the censorship, because so much has happened over the past 3 years in reference to the censorship, not just on YouTube and not just with those of us that do independent media, but even for people who are not in the media space at all, that just get removed from platforms like Twitter or Facebook for a lot of times for things that I don't even understand why they were removed. And then they're not even really given a full reason as to why they were removed either. It's really not fair, right? So this issue, mark my words, this issue, the censorship issue, is going to be huge, especially as we get closer and closer to the 2024 election.
Stop is, if they can't do it, then I would consider making them common carriers, where it's illegal to censor. I don't want to do that. I think it's much better for them to stay in the, as private companies. But they need to recognize the fact that they are now the public square. That is just the reality of our time. If you want to talk to large groups of Americans, you've got to do it. Those are the only places you can do it.
Pretty good, isn't it? Let me know in the comments.
Let me pause there. The other thing that I was going to say, that I was going to add, is that this also is a good opportunity for someone who is a candidate challenging Joe Biden to bring up the fact that this is why these platforms like Twitter, they need to be a public utility. These platforms do not exist without our data, but we don't make any money from it. We don't get any type of profit, not even like tokens. It would be kind of cool if you could get like tokens, kind of like the way Rockfin does it. So it's like your tweet got this many views or this much engagement, you get 10 tokens, right? It would be cool if they did something like that. Like, make it fun, make it like competitive or whatever, in a way, whatever you want to do. But we need to have some type of leverage here. I'm watching people just get removed from platforms after these platforms have used their data, have analyzed their data, and used it for other things. And it's like, we have no say-so in this matter. We're just there. And I think it's because we put up with it for so long. There seems to be no fight to push back against this. There would not be a Twitter, a Facebook, a YouTube, a Google, which is the largest search engine in the world, without our data. It just would not exist. So you have people who have become billionaires, who created these platforms, and they are making a hell of a living and paying their employees less than they should be paid. So they're exploiting their employees. They're billionaires. And we're the ones that's supplying all the data, and we don't get anything. And I feel like there needs to be more push for this, more push, man. Because what would these platforms be without us? And that's something I think Elon Musk needs to understand. What would Twitter be without us, Elon? For all the people you want to charge, you want people to pay $8. You want people to pay for this to get this many views, to read this many tweets. Does he not understand that all of us could just walk away from Twitter tomorrow and there would be no Twitter? This is what people have to get. And we need to start leveraging our power and stop just being like, oh man, yeah, I'm in Twitter jail. You know how many times I see these messages from people in DMs? I'm in Twitter jail, so I can't tweet for a whole week. And it's just, how long are we going to put up with this? How long? And don't even tell me go to Threads, because I already saw someone send me something else saying that they already got some type of censorship on Threads, which is Mark Zuckerberg's version of Twitter. So this is a constant issue. So the solution should not be leave that platform and go to this platform instead, because eventually the other platform starts censoring too. The solution should be for us to demand to get some type of return off of the data that we are supplying these search engines and these platforms. That should be the solution. And it would be incredible if there was a movement built around something like that. Otherwise, we continue to lose and people will continue to complain. And every week it's another person that tells me they were moved or they're in Twitter jail. I had to create another account because they got rid of me. I did this, I did that. Like, no. Why should they have so much control? That's just one of the things to think about, guys. I think we really need to start thinking about that. But I forgot the other part. Sorry. I went on a bit of a rant there. Went on a bit of a rant and I forgot the other part of the video. Sorry. I get passionate about this stuff. So anyway, later on in the interview, RFK Jr.'s wife actually joins. And I think you need to hear, how she feels about him running for president, because the thing is, like, it's not an easy position for a spouse to be in. It's just the reality, because when you run for president, that also involves your spouse, your children, even some of your distant, relatives. They come after your whole family.
Said, of course, that there are some issues that you plainly disagree with Bobby on. It can't be that that big food and big pharma are in lockstep to continually benefit from an unhealthy America. What are the areas that you do agree with Bobby on? And if you are happy to say, I ask you with all respect, are there any areas that you find more challenging? Because the truth is, within most marriages, like me and my wife find it difficult to agree for more than 15 minutes on any given subject. So where are the areas where the two of you are in plain alignment, and are there any subjects that you are comfortable sharing that you are not in alignment?
Well, if I'm being candid, where we differ is Bobby is very focused on facts and numbers, and I understand feelings and people, I think, in a different way. So even during...
That's kind of like, when I first heard this, I was like, that kind of reminds me of me and my husband, actually. Because it's just funny. I was listening to this and I was like, that sounds familiar to me, because my husband is very much data driven. Like, he focuses on like numbers and facts. And we were watching the interview with Kim Iverson. So Kim Iverson did an interview about September 11, right? I can't say too much about this, but she did an interview about September 11. And the gentleman that she had on, he was talking about what happened to Building 7. So if you haven't seen that interview, go watch it. But we were watching the interview and my husband was just like looking at it from the numbers and the data. So he was just like, I think this guy is full of it. Like, he didn't buy it at all. He's like, yeah, but if you look at structural engineering, it also shows that these things can happen and these things can happen. Meanwhile, I was the one that was just like, are you hearing this? Are you hearing what's being said? And what I realized is, like, I tend to go off of feeling and emotion, like, more so. I'll dig for research for this show, but just typically in my everyday life, I tend to go off of the feeling and how people feel and the emotions. Whereas he gets that, but he focuses on what are the facts? What do the numbers say? What does the data say? Right? So it was just interesting when I heard her say that, because I was like, that sounds so familiar.
The pandemic, I understand people being afraid. I understand people on both sides being afraid of getting the vaccine, of not getting the vaccine. People were terrified that they weren't going to be able to say goodbye to their mother or father that was passing away. There were so many feelings, overwhelmingly, just filling the air, and people's relationships, and everyone was disagreeing on a lot of things, and a lot of it was coming from just feelings that we were all having. So I think that's sometimes where I don't want to say get off track, but
I don't have feelings, Russell.
You're a cold lawyer. You're a brutal, heartless lawyer who thinks only in terms of the law. You don't care about people's emotions, like Cheryl, who frankly should be president.
Also, the biggest disagreement is about the dogs and whether they should go on the couch or not, or the bed.
Yeah, well, dirty dogs shouldn't be on a bed, but that's beside the point. Yeah, I think it's. I understand. Sometimes I think that feel.
And by the way, I don't like doggies on the bed either. Bed is where I lay my head. You know, I had allergies most of my life. I finally got to a point where I'm done with my allergy injections, so I would like to not have to be, revisit that phase of my life. So I don't like puppies on the bed either. I like pups, just not on my bed space.
Feelings should be addressed first, and maybe science second. So I don't know if that makes sense or if that is understandable, but that's how I feel.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose culturally we live in a space where science has, to some degree, has become the prevailing orthodoxy. And this is often without acknowledging that some science is a subset of certain interests. And I think the point that you are making about feelings, all of us know in our individual and familial lives that what we're dealing with are our emotional reactions to our own lives, to the relationships we have, to the way our experiences are either inhibited or encouraged. Those kind of conversations, though, I suppose, Cheryl, the risk is that people are able to be dismissive because of subjectivity, because of the very thing that makes it special, i.e. our individual experience as conscious entities is private, divine, perhaps connected to the prima materia of reality, consciousness itself, the crucible of all reality, God's self held within each of us individually, enshrining all of us collectively. It's a difficult thing when politics is primarily about who gets what, where, when, how, when it becomes about the instantiation of power, the manifestation of power, the organization of resources. And in a sense, I suppose, within any marriage, being complementary to one another is different from being the same as one another, I suppose. So perhaps having a feeling, intuitive person as well as a cold, unfeeling brute that cares only for legislation seems like a recipe for a successful marriage.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. It is, oftentimes perception is reality to people. So you have people that have read one article and they truly believe that article that they read. And then you have another group of people that have read a different article and it says something completely different, but that is also their reality. So it turns people against us and against each other. And like you're saying, we are all one. We're all one. We all want the same thing. We all want our children to be healthy. We want each other to be healthy and happy. And the only way to do that is to stop, to listen to each other, and
I agree.
To have a conversation and to try to understand the other person.
I think that's very important. Like what she was saying there, that you just have to listen to other people sometimes. And like, even if you do disagree with them, it's still good to have the conversation. I'm laughing at the dog on the bed comments in the chat. But it's really interesting. But the point I think that she was trying to make there is that some of these articles, some of the information that we take in, sometimes it is open for interpretation, and some people may interpret things differently. And I think if you're one of those people like RFK Jr. that is really more of a data numbers type of person, I think that you're able to not focus on, well, it could be this or it could be that. You're looking strictly at the data and the facts. And I think that's something to keep in mind, guys. Like, even when we read articles, like, some people may interpret it differently, right? I'm gonna go to some of the comments here and we'll go to our next story. Giovanni says, Sabby, in Italy, we always had public funding for the political party. Well, they are corrupted anyway. We should find internationally another way. Interesting. Thank you for that, Giovanni. I always love that name. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. We need public financing of ballot measures as well. Right. Because we talked about this with the ballot initiatives, how big money will come in to try to stop some of these ballot measures that benefit the people. And thank you for this as well, Roger. Nationalize this SOB, right? I asked people on Twitter, do you guys think that there should be some type of movement between content creators on YouTube to try to do some type of, I know we can't really form like a union, I guess, because we're technically contractors, right? But something, should there be some type of fight for content creators on YouTube? You know, Marco says, but when you don't let on the bed, they get sad and then they look at you sad. This is true. I am very much an independent, not just by registration, but I'm very much like, I was an independent kid and I like to raise independent pets. And if I had kids, I would like to raise them as an independent kid, meaning that I don't want them to get to the point where they get too comfortable. Once you bring them onto the bed, it's hard to get them not to come onto the bed, and then they get comfortable. It's the same theory that I have in reference to, and no shade to parents, but I don't agree with letting the child sleep in the bed with you. You know, I understand maybe they have a bad dream or something. You say, come in the bed or whatever. But I think you have to be careful about that type of dependence, where I've seen people let their toddlers like just sleep in the bed with them instead of sleeping in the crib. I think you have to create that type of independence, because you don't want them to constantly be coming into the bed. You know, that's you and your husband's space and your time. But that's a whole other discussion. I don't know where I got on that, but that's just my take on that. I am very much that way. Thanks for the super chat. FWC, DNC doesn't want RFK. Why take him seriously? I don't know if it's taking him seriously or not, but he is a candidate and he is polling pretty well to be primary challenging Joe Biden. So he is a candidate. So we are going to discuss him. Okay. We're moving on to this next story. This is a little bit different for me for this show, but I wanted to talk about it because I think it speaks on a larger issue. So when you hear me discuss this, I don't want us to focus on the personalities per se. I want us to focus on the bigger issue. And I've seen this happen before. If you have not heard, Keke Palmer, she's an actress. A lot of people like her. I remember when she was on this movie called Aquila and the Bee. She was a kid then, so she's been doing this for a long time. She went to an Usher concert. And I know some of the guys listening already are saying to themselves, uh-oh, not Usher. But she went to a Usher concert, and Usher decided to serenade her, Usher doing Usher things. And apparently her boyfriend had an issue, not so much with the serenading, but the way that she was dressed. And his point is that basically, you are a mom now. You should not dress that way. So I want to show you one of his tweets, and then we're going to talk about the bigger issue. So this is him, Darius. He said, we live in a generation where a man of the family doesn't want the wife and the mother to his kids to showcase booty cheeks to please others, and he gets told how much of a hater he is. This is my family and my representation. I have standards and morals to what I believe. I rest my case. Now, if you look at the comments, it's there are some comments in support of him, and then there were some comments not in support of him. Lee, for example, said absolutely nothing wrong with that, brother. You've always been an upstanding man, and you're already a great father. I would try to keep it off of here, though. People aren't rational here. And he said last tweet of the day for sure. That's for the real ones to understand. So here's the thing. And then we'll get to the video. I don't know if social media was the best place to go to for that. Now, there was another tweet where he said, you're a mom. And it was, I think he removed that one. I couldn't find it today. But it was the video with her and Usher. So let's get to that particular video. Because I want you to see, like, and you guys be honest. Tell me what you think. Do you have a problem with what she has on, and tell me why? And then we're going to get to the bigger issue, because I'm going to tell you this tends to be a mistake, I think, sometimes that people make early on in a relationship. So listen to this. So this is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but this is King of Reeds. And he does really good commentary. I want to show you, there's some things he says here about this particular situation, and then I'm going to chime in.
Name this video Dear Darius, but nobody knows who Darius is, so he's going to be Keke Palmer's baby daddy, period. So recently, Keke Palmer went to see Usher in Las Vegas for his residency, and she was brought on stage. So Usher serenaded her, sung to her. It was a cute vibe. It was even grown and sexy, and Keke Palmer like she was enjoying herself, and she...
This is the outfit, so I just wanted to pause so you can see. We will not show the back of the outfit on this platform. So just letting you know, we can't show the back of the outfit, but basically, you know, her, this is like a bodysuit that's a thong. And so the cheeks are out, basically. Let's go on.
She was moving as a celebrity. She was also enjoying herself. It's just like, I'm getting this moment, da 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 da. She looked amazing. Her outfit was beautiful. And now you have her baby daddy talking about, he's not jealous of Usher singing to her. It's the fact that her outfit, though, because she's a mother. Hello? The same man that recorded her shaking her clappers on Instagram stories and posted it. That's why this conversation is about ownership, misogynoir, and patriarchy.
Let me pause there for just a second. So that's a piece that some people are not aware of, that before she was a mother and they were still boyfriend and girlfriend, yes, he did post a video of her on Instagram where she was clapping the cheeks and she, I'm sorry, this is just, it's funny to talk about this, but where she was like bending over, clapping like her little butt cheeks in the camera. Like, it's just, there's camera and butt. Like, that's it. That's mainly what you see. And he did take that video and he did post it on Instagram. So this is why some people are just like, you were okay with her doing those types of things then, but now that she's a mom, you're not okay with her doing it. You knew who she was before she became a mom. So that's another thing that some people have issue with. Let's go on.
I find this hilarious, how men consistently want to be traditional, but are not bringing traditional coin. How you want to be the man, the head of household, when you don't even fit it on the taxes. I'm not understanding. Keke Palmer makes way more than you. She has way more social capital than you. And if she was to divorce you for any reason, I can't even talk about divorce because y'all not even married. Hello? Is tradition in the room with us? Apparently not. This woman who is the mother of your child is not married. Y'all literally had a baby out of wedlock. Like, if we're talking about tradition, we're talking about Bible standard, because that's what y'all want to call it. Y'all don't fit any of that. So why are we having a conversation about it? Instead of having some decency of a respect for Keke Palmer, knowing that she's a public figure, He did what other dumb men do, embarrassed her online by talking about her. And when everybody thought it was a joke, he could have just played it off as a joke. He didn't want to. That man wanted to make sure that it was known. Responded with a tweet talking about this generation doesn't believe in tradition. Let me read it to y'all because you can't make this.
Okay, so I read that part to you, but I do want to ask this question. Is patriarchy on display here? Is that what this is? Let me know in the chat. Do you agree with King Reeds that this is a patriarchy issue? Now, I saw the outfit that she had on. It's not something that I would wear. Whether I'm single, married, mom or not, that's not something that I would wear. But I also was very much impressed by the fact that she just had a baby and she looks like that. And so for me, when this story went viral on Twitter, I was like, people were like, she just had a baby, da-da-da-da. And I looked that up and I was like, damn, she just had a baby and she looks like that. Her body looks amazing. I don't know how she bounced back fast, right? So that's what I was thinking about. But is this an issue about patriarchy? Let's go on.
We live in a generation where a man of the family doesn't want the wife and mother to his kids to showcase booty cheeks to please others, and he gets told how much of a hater he is. This is my family and my representation. I have standards and morals to what I believe. I rest my case. You've made no case, and to the gulag you go for being an idiot. Now, what's also funny about this is in 2020, he tweeted, when I get insecure about myself, I start to divert my issues instead of acknowledging it. When I tell you Twitter is a diary for a lot of folks, and I enjoy seeing it because it lets us in how you are as a person. It lets us know how you've been thinking for the last 10 years or however long you've been online. I love it. I love that y'all are expressive about how you feel so I can be able to judge you by the contents of your character that you display online. And you're not telling me, no shade to Keke Palmer, you're not telling me that Keke Palmer was not aware of these things. After this, he was getting...
Okay, so here's my take on this, and she did respond. I'm gonna show you her response in just a second. Here's my take on this. I see a couple people in the chat saying, no, this is actually... They think that he's really upset because it was Usher. Usher. It's funny because I thought about that Boondocks skit where they made fun of Usher and they were like, Usher's gonna steal your woman and stuff like that. So I don't know, but I will say this. I think sometimes when people start out dating each other, sometimes people show you who they are from the get-go, right? So the video that he posted on Instagram, obviously he knew that this is how she was. Sometimes I think what happens is that there is this expectation that once you get married or once you become a parent, that you are going to change and you are going to evolve. You're not going to behave that way anymore because you're now a parent. And that's not always the case. And so I think it's important to pay attention to what a person, who they are at that time. I think you shouldn't expect the change to happen. That doesn't say that it won't happen for some people. But if you knew that this was the type of stuff that she liked to do, especially you video recorded, and you figure she's a mom now, she's supposed to have outgrown that behavior. Maybe not. Maybe not. Now, she did respond and she said, not trying to be the person, but I love my man, period. And there's a crying emoji. And I think that this particular situation, this particular incident, I think it could have just been handled off of social media. Like, I guess for me, what I'm trying to understand, if I'm trying to dive into his mind, I just don't understand why he did this on social media, especially on Twitter, of all places. So this is something that could have been discussed, like behind closed doors. That's my take on it. But again, what is something that you should learn from this? Pay attention to who you got, who they are. Like in the beginning, I mean, and I've seen this happen before with like guy friends of mine or like with girlfriends of mine. They start dating someone and they're like, well, yeah, he said he's not really want to put a title or anything, or he don't really want to be committed to anything right now, but that's going to change. I can change him. Can you? Can you change people? I think people have to want to change. So that's something to think about. Something to think about. Outside Steeler fan said, if someone looks good in sexy clothes, let them wear it anywhere. Off the Rails said, a woman should be able to walk nude through a crowd and not get unwanted touch. I Am Lux says, men think they own a woman and can dictate to them. Leave him. Man. More from Outside Steelers fan. He's mad others like her more than him. T. Watts. Sounds like Keke and her man have fundamentally different family values. But see, this is another one of those things that should be discussed earlier on, right? In the relationship. I mean, this is one of those things like, what exactly do you want? Nikki, child, she's grown. She didn't do anything wrong. Marco, it's patriarchal because there is nothing inherently wrong with her being slutty. Everyone is free to be as slutty as they want, and no one else has to like it. Interesting. What's that.com? He's virtue signaling to conservative culture. Well, and Roger Meadows and I've talked about this multiple times. In the Black community, even though we may be more liberal or progressive, on some issues, there are some issues where we tend to be more conservative on if we are brought up in the church. And that's usually where it comes from. Yeah. What? Red says, I should be able to rob a bank and not go to jail. I don't know what is happening here. Oh my God. Okay. The views of the people in the comments does not express the views of the Sabby Sabs show. Oh my God. Quick shout out here, guys. Thank you so much. The fundraiser, I want to give you an update. We're doing really well. So far, we've raised $1,433. This is for the Boston Mutual Aid, the RBN chapter for Boston. We're going to do a barbecue July 29th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. But so far, we're doing really well. Our goal is 2,000. Like I said, we may not need 2,000 for the entire barbecue, but whatever is left over, if we hit that goal, that'll be used towards the fall action, which is going to be a food drive and a clothing drive. So I'll go ahead and put that link again for the blah, 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 blah. Sorry. The GoFundMe in the chat. Oh, never mind. Eric already did it. But yeah, looking pretty good. And thank you guys so much. Those of you that donated, I'm very, 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 very thankful. Really am. So people are looking forward to it, and I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. But yes, I did go live earlier because Jill was coming on, so to accommodate Jill Stein. And yeah, that's it, guys. That's it for me tonight. So all I got to say is have a good night. Keep up the fight.